William is the longtime lead of our local Charlotte user group. He kickstarted this thing, brought this thing back from the dead back in what, 2014 or 2015. I honestly can't remember at this point because we've been doing this so long. William is passionate about a number of things. He's a data and analytics consultant by day. He's a business plan developer by night. He's trying to take over the world one step at a time. Loves to ride his motorcycle. Great person to speak to in the data and analytics space. William's going to tell you a little bit about finding land in the Carolinas today. It's a passion project for him. He's passionate about getting away from the city. So he's going to tell you how he approached that using a data-informed approach. All right. So our next presenter, we'll have someone else introduce. Or are we jumping straight into William's presentation? I actually did not catch that.
I think we can jump in and we'll introduce everybody as they.
Got it. Okay. Awesome. Let's do it that way. All right, William, you're on, buddy.
All right. Welcome, everyone. 2023 Virtual Carolinas Tug. I'm going to share my screen here. And this presentation, as Jeremy said, is about finding land in the Carolinas. So even before we talk about the Carolinas, it's, there's a lot of places in the world and we have a lot of options these days as remote employees. Many of us are remote employees. So sometimes the first question is where don't you want to be? So if you can figure that out and you do settle on North Carolina, the rest of this will help you. The first thing to know about the Carolinas is that there are three distinct geographical regions: the mountains, the Piedmont, and the coast. And there's no better way to discover than actually getting out there and seeing it for yourself. So gratuitous motorcycle shot here. For me, the best way to discover things about the region that you're in is to buy a motorcycle. So not for everybody, but having the ability to have a machine that gets you out there and it doesn't take a lot of gas mileage, you can see quite a bit of stuff. For me, this is my Google timeline history. And you can see probably one of the things I'm most proud of in life is just everything that I've been able to see by traveling 100,000 miles on motorcycles over the last 15 years. Each of these dots represent a destination that a person spends, 10, 15 minutes. So as a data source, this is the first one that we're going to talk about, Google Timeline. As a data source, this is a really valuable resource. You put this Google Maps on your phone. You can turn on you can turn on a GPS tracking app, and that will give you very precise routing. This chart, this one, for example, is a trip that I took down to Charleston one day. It was a 500-mile day. Another long trip was about 500 miles up into Virginia. And the Google timeline really, it just helps you record your tracks, record where you've been, and the data itself you can export. So when you go to a specific day, you can export this data KML, and the KMLs, those can be imported directly into Tableau. You can also take these KMLs and you can import them into the Google My Maps application. So taking a step back, this discussion is a lot about the data sources that you can use to discover the Carolinas, to discover land, and how these different data sources help you to make those decisions about where you want to be. So in Google My Maps, when you go to your places, go to Maps, and you're able to take these different KML files, you can import them all together into a single map. And this is just a good resource for you as you're gathering information about different places. This particular map is one I built over the years of some favorite places that I've been to, different routes, different rides, and sort of these blue and red lines represent kind of the outer periphery of the familiarity I have with the Carolinas. So Google Maps is one really good resource. The KML files can be imported directly into Tableau. So speaking of Tableau, of all the slides I've got today, 3 of these slides actually speak directly to Tableau. The rest of them are about data sources. This is a visualization that I made with all of that KML data and exported out of Google Maps, out of the timeline. This was my 2021 Iron Viz submission. So available on my Tableau public profile. A lot of real interesting things you can do with that KML data. The next slide, this is probably the coolest thing I have to share. It is just a visualization of all those routes that I did in a single day, and they're animated using that paging function inside of the timeline. So you're not always constrained to Tableau when you do creative things with data. You can do a lot of interesting, different, cool things. So Google Timeline, map data, route data, all real interesting. Helps you to discover what's out there so you can see it for yourself. When you do that discovery and you find kind of the place that you want to be, you ask yourself what things are important to you. And for me personally, these are the things that are important to me. I want to be able to have a good signal. I want good internet speed. I want the skies to be dark. I haven't seen a dark sky in a very long time, so I want to see dark skies. And new motorcycling roads, you saw the maps a second ago. Been all over the Carolinas. I've kind of worn out everything within 50 miles. So I'm looking forward to new motorcycling roads. And finally, cooler summers. So the search for data to support these ends are what we're going to cover next. First off, most cell phone providers, you're going to be able to find a coverage map on their website. And for me, I use Google Fi. They've got 4G and 5G map here, and I'm right up there in that light green area. So you know what you're getting into. Wherever you go. If 5G is important to you, for me, it's not as important because I'm online all the time anyway. So good signal for sure, but really good internet is the most important. So for North Carolina, we have a great resource called NC1 Map. You can go out there to this site. You can look at the fixed broadband service area. So when you find a location that you're interested in, you can go to the map and you can look for the address, and you'll be able to discover exactly what carriers are out there, what companies. And in this spot, in Ashe County and in Allegheny County, I think after the 2008 mortgage crisis, they had some funding available, and they spent that funding in order to get fiber optic cable to every house in those two counties. So those counties have been fully fiber optic for over 10 years. Moving on, dark skies. So here is a light pollution map, and this is another interesting data source that you can leverage. This is a light pollution map, and here at a zoomed in level, you think, okay, well, Charlotte for sure is got a lot of light pollution and maybe right outside of town, but really right outside of town is still very brown. You have to actually go out quite a distance to be before you get a fully dark sky. And this is something that I'm looking forward to, this spot that I found up in Allegheny County. Of course, for me, my biggest passion is motorcycling and seeing everything. So there's a couple of interesting resources. If you love road trips and if you love getting out on the road and exploring by motorcycle or by car, these are a couple of interesting sites. The first is motorcycleroads.com. When you go out there, you can search for certain routes or counties or locations, North Carolina. When you open up the map, you can see that on this particular site, Charlotte here is just kind of on the edge of some of the really most interesting motorcycle roads in the Carolinas. There's another site though called rever.co, which is specifically for motorcycling. And when you look at they have a national map, and here you can see that there's a lot of stuff out west. There's something here in the middle for the Ozarks, but really the Appalachian Mountains are where you get some of the best roads in the United States. So Charlotte is just kind of on the edge here. So for me, one of the biggest things about moving up into Allegheny County is getting 2 hours closer to all these really beautiful mountain roads and getting closer to Kentucky, West Virginia to be able to explore what's out there. Now, the last and super important criteria to me is climate change is real. Stuff's getting hotter. And, every summer I feel a little bit trapped inside my house from all the heat. And so getting up at higher in elevation is really important to me. So a couple of screenshots from the last couple of years, in the middle of summer, whenever it's really hot, you look at a radar map. And as a data source, again, the weather maps are a great resource. This summer when it's 90, 95 degrees, log into weather.com or Weather Underground or any one of these and look to see where that cooler weather is. And for us in the Southeast, it's the Appalachian Mountains. Down in the Cherokee, Murphy area, all the way up into Virginia and West Virginia. every summer I look at these maps in an envious way of our neighbors who live in the high country. So weather map, and of course weather data. There's tons of weather data resources if you want to do some research. And that actually brings us to our third and final Tableau visualization that's in this deck. This is one that I'm super excited about. Arabella's Gap is the area where I've got some land now. And on the average temperatures all between in the summer rarely gets above 80. So I'm very excited about that. Of course, when we get back to the main question, how do you find land? You can do all the discovering. You can spend 100,000 miles running all over the Carolinas. Occasionally you'll see a for sale by owner sign. You might find something. I've researched many of those over the years, pulled over and called a number and asked people about land. But I think the biggest payoff that you're going to find if you really are interested in finding land somewhere is to be obsessive compulsive about checking realtor.com, Zillow.com on a daily basis. Deals come up, people decide to sell the land, and it goes away really quickly. So being OCD about going to realtor.com and keeping your filters out there and searching for what comes up, land deals, that's probably going to be your best bet of actually finding something. Of course, the time that you spend to do the exploration, it'll be more meaningful to you when you see something come up. You'll already know if it's worth going to research. Once you find that piece of land that you really want to dig into deep, there's no better resource than every county's geographical information system, the GIS. So you don't need to know what website. You just go to Google, type, Union County, North Carolina GIS, and it'll take you to a link for the GIS system. If you've never used the GIS systems, they're different, but they've got a lot of the similar things. There's usually a layers information, so you can pick layers. You can pick contours to see what the elevation looks like, what the topography looks like. If you're buying land in the mountains or you're looking for land in the mountains, you need to be very cautious about the topography. Many times I've gotten excited about a piece of land only to find out that the average slope is 45 degrees, or a very steep slope, and that's very difficult to build, very expensive to build on. So the first thing that you want to do is find that land, look at the topography, and see if it seems feasible to you to build on it. Lots of other really good resources on these GIS sites to think about. There's the information card, which will get you to information about the deed. You might find some interesting documents like previous surveys or just the history of the land. That can also be very interesting. If I haven't mentioned yet, this is the actual piece of land that it took me about 10 months to close the deal on this. This is a piece of land that really has been in the same family for about 100 years, or since the inception of the county, Allegheny County. So I'm the first person outside of that family to own this piece of land in this estate. So very excited about that. Other really good tools, of course, is the satellite imagery that's on the GIS site. So you want to use that to see. Of course, many times before I've seen a really good deal on realtor.com, looked at it on satellite, and then discovered, okay, well, there's 7 chicken houses right next door. So a big agricultural development like that is going to create some kind of nuisance odors and things. So the satellite imagery is really important whenever you want to think about this. Of course, lots of tools for measuring and drawing on the land as well. So you got that. And very important is your soil. You want to be conscious of what soil types. So in order to discover things about the soil types, you want to think about this website called Web Soil Survey. When you go out to this site, it's part of the USDA. You target the location that you're interested in learning about, and you can find out the coded terms for the different soil types that will educate you as far as different properties of the soil, including drainage, whether it's good to build a septic tank drainage field. That's really critical if you want to just build a traditional septic tank and drainage field. And of course, other information like frost action, frost-free days, and whether the soil is acidic and causing corrosion of concrete and steel. And the pH is something you can find out on this site. So for example, this site that I have, this property, it has a pH of 5.3. And when I watch this YouTube video, 5.3 is a little bit less acidic than black coffee. So that's an interesting fact about it. The final data source that I used in my search, and it probably really didn't contribute to the search itself as much as just what something that's very interesting, is a map of indigenous cultures around the world. So this particular property has a history of 5 different indigenous cultures having lived there. So I'm interested, it'd be very interesting to see what happens when we begin excavating a driveway and things there. So not necessarily data, but again, if you're looking at mountain land, topography is really important. So a tool called SketchUp is something that I've used to basically draw out the topography by exporting that data from the GIS site and then looking at it and drawing it in a 3D model on SketchUp. So this is something that you could use to begin your planning, to begin dreaming about the land and drawing out what sort of vision you might have for what you would build and how you would develop that land. Lots of resources in today's discussion today, lots of links. This presentation will be provided. Here's all the things that we looked at. If you ever want to talk land, or if you're ever interested having a chat about it, feel free to reach out to me. Glad to have a discussion. Thanks so much for letting me share. I'm going to kick it back over to Jeremy and Dare for the next introduction.